In one of our previous episodes, we talked about the different jobs within tech, one of which is engineering management. Today, we're joined by the wonderful Amal Hussein, engineering manager at NPM, and we're going to chat more in depth about engineering management. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Ladybug Podcast. I'm Kelly.
I'm Allie.
And I'm Emma, and we're debugging the tech industry. Hey, Kelly, have you heard about this cool tool called AWS Amplify?
Tell me about it.
It's a suite of tools and services that enables developers to build full-stack serverless and cloud-based web and mobile apps. You get to use whichever framework or technology you want on the front end.
That sounds cool. Will it help me get up and running with things like hosting?
Yeah.
Authentication?
You betcha.
Manage GraphQL?
Totally.
How about serverless functions, APIs, machine learning, chatbots, file storage?
Yes to everything! Amplify is built especially in a way to enable traditionally front-end developers, like yourself, Kelly, to be successful because you can use your existing skill set to build real-world, full-stack apps that in the past would require deep knowledge around back-end, DevOps, and scalable infrastructure. The Amplify console also allows you to use a GitHub repository to deploy to a globally available CDN with CI and CD built in.
It's super cool. Where can I learn more?
If you want to learn more about AWS Amplify, visit aws-amplify.github.io.
So, Amal, tell us about yourself. What got you into engineering management?
Hi, Allie and Emma. First of all, thanks so much for having me on the show. I'm really excited to be talking about a new role for me. I still identify as a software engineer who's maybe crossed over to the dark side, or what can be known as the dark side to some. But I was a software engineer working at Boku. I was a tech lead and had been a project lead before in other roles. Working at Boku, there was a lot of, I would say, lots of different types of things that you're doing on a project that really extends beyond typical engineering. You're doing a lot of product work, figuring out stuff, unblocking, managing up sideways, etc. And managing up has been something that I've done successfully for a long time in my career. And it kind of led to I think, an acknowledgement and of my leaning into just, being comfortable with being a leader or being in charge of things. And that kind of, it was a tough acknowledgement for me because, I didn't really, I think walking away from day-to-day software engineering was a big decision. But ultimately, I realized that as an engineering manager, especially depending on the role, you're still doing software engineering. You're just doing it through people. And literally also just, you're still writing software sometimes, but you're not responsible for the day-to-day delivery cycle. So.
Yeah, that would be a tough pill to swallow if you were kind of on the fence. I'm curious, how has that been for you? Is it harder having to deal with people on a day-to-day basis as opposed to computers?
I think people are way more complicated than machines. And yes, I would say that human problems are intersectional and they're very different than, the kind of binary problems that you run into when trying to scale a project or, trying to, debug a flaky test. So, you have to really be adaptable. And I think one of the biggest challenges is really understanding that everyone doesn't think like you. And so, having to kind of calibrate to your team is something that's really important, and that's been something that's a muscle that I'm still exercising, But yeah. So anyway, so I'm new at this role. I joined NPM a few months ago, and so it's a new role, new company, so lots of challenges there. But it's been a really interesting, very interesting journey, and I have a really incredible team that's very humbling. It's been, I would say, a fire hose experience. So for those of you who haven't maybe seen or heard from me in a few months, that's, I've been under the NPM fire hose of just really learning how to do this new job, but do it well. And also, just learning all things NPM and, all of the wonderful world that is the registry, which is a magical cave full of lots of mysteries. So.
That's really cool. I also made the transition from engineering to a more people-centric role with teaching, and can definitely agree that the people challenges stay challenging and stay different, whereas engineering challenges, I think, kind of repeat themselves to some extent and tend to be solvable in a more predictable way than people problems do. So definitely relate to that, even though it's a little bit different teaching than doing strict management. As an engineering manager, what does your day-to-day schedule look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. It really varies from, debugging things with my team to doing design reviews to doing planning for our cadence, to talking to other stakeholders, getting security review done. It really varies. You really have to kind of exercise all aspects of the software delivery cycle, because you're really responsible for the end-to-end delivery of a thing. And so, it also means stretching outside of your comfort zone, right? And also knowing that, you're not the expert at everything. And it's very important that you lean on the experts, and you fill in the gaps where you can. And so it's been amazing for me just how much more well-rounded I think I've become, and a lot more comfortable with, I would say, just literally all aspects, from QA to release, right, to inception, ideation, whatever it is. There's just a lot of, there's just a full cycle that you're now involved in and that you're responsible for seeing through, and so everybody kind of has, if you can imagine a baton, and ultimately different people have the baton at different times, but ultimately you're responsible for getting that baton across the finish line. And so I think that's been a very interesting shift for me, the accountability factor and the buck stops here factor. It's always great, even when you're a tech lead, there's always someone else to blame, right? But I think when you're an engineering manager, you're really responsible for the delivery and the output. And whether your team, is aware of it or not, right? Ultimately the accountability falls on you, not necessarily even your team. And so, so I think my day is varied, and it's full of lots of different types of responsibilities. So
that's awesome. I always thought I wanted to get into management, but I loved your comment about managing people being intersectional and not binary, because that's something I never consciously had thought about before. I guess I always thought, I love communicating with people. I think I would be a good manager, but it's not that cut and dry. And to your point, being a manager is hard. Managing people is not an easy task. And I think that we perhaps can take our managers for granted occasionally, perhaps because we don't necessarily see all of the things that they're doing for us or seeing all the battles that they're fighting for us. What would you say is the hardest thing about being a manager?
So I would say one thing I kind of want to rephrase a little bit is I don't feel like I manage people. I feel I support them, right? So ultimately, you're there to support them and get shit out of their way, and or get shit into their way if that's what they're looking for, right? But really, I would say, especially for software engineers who are incredibly talented and really all knowledge workers. I think this is a rule that applies to all knowledge workers. There's people often know what they want. And so ultimately you're there to support them and guide them and sponsor them and, and mentor them. But it's different types of, I have a different relationship with everyone on my team based on kind of where they are in their career and, and where they are with what they want to do in the company. Some of my teammates I'm sponsoring more, for, and advocating more, for them. So some folks I'm doing more mentoring, some folks I'm doing more coaching, so it's a different kind of relationship with every person. So I think kind of calibrating myself and the way I operate and the way I think and the way I would get stuff done, kind of calibrating that to someone else is probably the hardest thing, right? Because people don't think like you, and they shouldn't, because that would be a bad thing, right? If we all thought alike. But there's a bias that comes with your thinking, and so I think part of being a good manager, and one of the hardest things, is really being conscious of your bias, right? And making room for others in the way they solution, in the way they problem solve, and making it like having an inclusive environment where people feel comfortable sharing their opposing views, right? Or opposing approaches to said thing. So it's very important that everybody can bring their full selves to the table and they don't feel rejected in any way, right? And so I think, just creating that safe space, being conscious of your bias, like these are all really challenging things. I think context switching is another challenge. Like you're doing a lot of context switching, and sometimes it's really exciting and sometimes it's exhausting, And so being conscious of how you schedule your day and what you're tackling at a given time is a huge challenge. Another challenge I would say is, your day gets hijacked, and so you kind of start out your day thinking, okay, I'm going to accomplish A, B, C, D. And then like you accomplish A and half of B. And it's because, you were firefighting or dealing with other problems. And like knowing that your day is not your own. And that's a very big shift from being a software engineer, right? Like where you're like, okay, here's my day. I set the pace for myself. You have to really be flexible to like other people hijacking your day for good things, right? But you have to be, flexibility is like key, I think, to staying sane and to kind of not having like a who moved my cheese moment every day. So but yeah, I mean it's a hard job. I have a newfound respect for managers in general. I would say good managers, or people who strive to be good managers, because I've had plenty of bad and good managers, and it's easy to know the difference. But yeah, it's a hard job. And being an engineering manager in particular, like you're switching from like something that's so binary to people which are like the opposite of that, and kind of transitioning between software and people problems, both really complex in their own ways, is a big challenge. So I think it might be the hardest management job, to be honest, is to be an engineering manager, but I'm like now tooting my own horn.
No, I mean, I think it's wonderful. And to hear someone who's so self-aware and understands that people are not all the same and we can't put them all in one box and expect them all to thrive. It's quite refreshing. It takes a special type of person to be a great manager. And we'll get a little bit more into that in just a little bit, but I'm curious what your management style is. So when we talk hands-on versus hands-off, I've had managers on both ends of the spectrum. And you had mentioned that you work remotely and you work with teams, all over Europe and the US, and we'll talk more about remote working a little bit later. But what's your management style? Do you have set meetings with your employees like once a week, or what does that look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks, Emma. So I have one-on-ones with my team every week, which maybe sound excessive for some, or maybe not. But it's really important to kind of have that pulse of what's happening and kind of having a consistent communication channel that's there. But I have weekly team meetings and one-on-ones with my team, and beyond that, there's just company-wide, engineering-wide meetings that happen at a weekly basis. So for like a distributed company, we're all meeting and talking fairly often, like in a synchronous way. But then there's also being connected on Slack, and there's pairing sessions that my team sets up with each other that I join sometimes. And, so we're all kind of in various types of communication throughout the day and throughout the week. But in terms of hands off versus hands on, I would say I'm very much a hands-on manager, and because I jump into debug, pair, test, code review, um, uh, I kind of do. I'm kind of alongside my team for every aspect of the delivery cycle, as well as like all the other stuff with like stakeholder, figuring out stuff with stakeholders, and like all of the other stuff that's beyond the scope of like my team's delivery. So, in a sense, I kind of have two jobs, so where one, I feel like I'm an engineer on the team, and the other job is like, kind of being an external representative for my team, like throughout the company. But I mean, in terms of, I think my style, I'm very much still in discovery mode. I think I'm still figuring a lot out about, I think what my preferences are, and I think also what the challenges are of like managing such a diverse and like distributed team. So I would say we can check back in, but it's still very much I would say promise is not resolved on that yet.
DigitalOcean offers the simplest, most developer-friendly cloud platform. It's optimized to make managing and scaling apps easy with an intuitive API, multiple storage options, integrated firewalls, load balancers, and more. From predictable pricing to flexible configurations to world-class customer support, you'll get access to all the infrastructure services you need to grow. Plus, DigitalOcean's community provides over 2,000 tutorials to help you stay up to date on the latest open source software, languages, and frameworks. Get started on DigitalOcean for free with a free $100 credit at do.co/ladybug. That's do.co/ladybug. Just for our listeners' sake, how long have you been working as an engineering manager?
I'd say almost 5 months, so not that long. And I've been a fire hose experience because being an engineering manager at NPM, there's a lot to learn, a lot of things to come up to speed with about how things work internally at in the registry. And just to give folks some context, I work on a team that works on the registry, so it's not so much the CLI or the thing that you kind of think of when you think of NPM, but we work on the registry where all of the actual packages like live, and so it's the machine that hosts and runs, and it's like the time machine basically that where all the packages live. So we're much more, internal facing, not so much external, but our kind of our touch points are the CLI, and any other interface, any other client like Yarn, or even the Java community has some interfaces directly to the registry. So we have the endpoints that we manage the endpoints that allow other package managers to connect with the registry.
Awesome. We've talked a little bit about management style and the hard parts of being an engineering manager, but I want to know why you made the decision to transition, and what the best thing about being an engineering manager is.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I made the decision to transition, but the reason why I was like, okay, I think I want to do this is because I noticed just a pattern in like all of my projects and jobs where I was like always, I always ended up being the person that was like the go-to person for said thing, or I ended up being, I don't know, being the project lead or tech lead for something. There was just kind of a trend, and I feel really comfortable kind of stepping into roles where there's uncertainty and there's lots to figure out. Those kinds of things typically didn't faze me. I also was really comfortable working with stakeholders and managing up or sideways, like depending on like what the situation needed. So I I think it was a realization that like, through talking with other people in this role, that like, hey, maybe this would actually be a good fit for me. It was really important that I was somewhere that had a hands-on engineering management culture, because this is my first role, and I'm still not sure if I want to do this full time, like forever and ever and ever. Like I might want to go back to being a principal engineer in a few years, or maybe do a pendulum swing, right? Like do management for a little while, go back to hands-on. I haven't really decided if this is like a permanent track for me yet, but I knew that it was something that I wanted to try. And, I was fortunate enough to get the opportunity to try it at the maybe craziest place in the world to try it. So, which is NPM. They took a chance on me, and, I'm like learning a ton and really enjoying it so far. But I can, if I'm honest, I can totally see myself in a couple of years saying, you know what, I think I want to be a principal engineer for a little while and kind of do that pendulum swing, which is something that's very common. You see that a lot with engineering managers. They'll go back to writing software full time for a few years and come back into it, because I think it's important to if you're staying at this level anyway, to make sure that you're not, you don't have any attrition with your software, right? Skills. And I think you're more effective. I don't know, the closer you are to the code, the more effective you can be, even just guiding your team. But we'll see. I might want to do that, or move into like an executive role in a few years as well. It's still TBD for me. I wish I had like a better answer, but
that's quite all right. Yeah, no, I'd be looking forward to chatting with you again in several months or a year and seeing where your head's at on that. But I think it's good to note too that you can do the so-called pendulum swing and go back to development if that's something that you want. With any role, you can get burned out if it's a ton of work, and it's okay to switch different domains every so often. So it was nice to hear you say that. My question is, do you think someone should be an engineer prior to being a manager? Do you think that that's helped you? And do you think it's something that engineering managers should look to have on their resume before they switch into management?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I just realized I didn't answer Allie's question about what's the best thing about being a manager. I'll tell you that first. Best thing by far, I think the best thing about being a manager is just the impact that you can have. And like, especially for me as a woman, person of color, I mean, I have both people on my team that identify as women and people of color. And so it's just a phenomenal thing for me to be able to actually, I would say, relate to them on a different level, which isn't very common in our industry. But specifically, like just being able to kind of push people or identify, like work with people on their goals and identify like what is the thing that you really want to achieve, and okay, cool, let's make it happen. And then making it happen, just that gratification of, I think, really actually being able to push the needle in someone's life and career has been incredibly gratifying. And that's the thing that for me, like, makes me want to do this forever. But I think that the challenges of middle management in general are pretty burnout prone, right? Like I think it's challenging to stay in a middle management role for several years, because I think it's, you're in a very tough spot where, you're managing like an executive team, and then you're managing expectations from your team. And it's tough. Like being a middle manager is not easy. And so I think kind of, continuing to take all the lessons that you learned as a middle management and then move into an executive role where you can make an impact at a team level makes sense. Or, going back into principal engineer role where you can, make things more effective at the team level, is another route. So back to your original question. No, I remember it, which was, should someone be an engineer prior to being an engineering manager? I would say absolutely. If you can't do the job of people on your team, like you shouldn't. I don't think you should be. I don't know if you should be leading them. I don't know. That feels like really conservative, maybe thing to say. But I think you have to have some element of relatability to your team. So I would say, yeah, you need to definitely be an engineer, and you have to understand what the challenges are that come with being an individual contributor. And knowing what those challenges are allows you to, I think, be more effective at guiding your team through challenges, solutions, etc. So if you can't relate, you can't if you can't relate to them, you can't be effective. And and I'm not sure that it would be good for your team as well. To have someone that doesn't have experience writing software. But I guess it doesn't mean you're going to be a bad manager. It just, there's going to be there's aspects of relatability, I think, that are going to be challenging. And depending on how the company's structured, it might be difficult for you to even do your job well, because, most engineering managers I know are somewhat hands-on. So if you don't understand software delivery cycle or what it means to, do a code review, then, there's parts of your job that I think would be challenging to do. But yeah, I don't know. Emma, what do you think?
I would say yes, because I had a manager previously, and I thought she was a great person, but she was a design director. And this was really difficult for me to advance my career, because she didn't fully understand the software engineering role. And as a result, that definitely hindered my ability to achieve a promotion. It was one of those things where I had to meet the software engineering criteria to move forward. But she wasn't able to accurately assess whether or not I had met those. So I definitely think it is, I don't want it to sound like gatekeeping at all, right? It's more than just knowing the technical side of things to be a great manager, but it definitely is a huge factor. I've also had engineering managers who in the past were so caught up with wanting to code all the time that they kind of shirked their responsibilities to their employees, which was really, really hard for me when I needed support. So yes and no. I think it's a double-edged sword almost. You can't just say yes or no. I definitely do think it helps, obviously. But it's more than just knowing the tech stack. It's also making sure that at the end of the day, you're putting your people first.
Yeah. And really, I think that's a great, I'm glad you said that, because I think that's another challenge of being an engineering manager, is that or especially a new one, I think, is, sometimes, you can really get focused on the technical challenges. And, you have to really kind of pull your head out of there and remember, there are people challenges that are the priority always, and you kind of have to really remind yourself, nope, this is people first, fix the people problem. The tech stuff can wait. Right. So the tech stuff is secondary to the technical challenges are secondary to the people challenges. Right. And so yeah, I can totally relate to that. And I'm sorry to hear that you had that experience, by the way.
That's okay. I mean, it kind of helped me realize what I want and need, which I think is a good thing.
So part management is it's a two-way street, right, Emma? And sometimes it's really important. It's really important for people to give you feedback, right? And not only should you be it's good for them to give it to you, but you should be soliciting it as well. You should constantly be asking for feedback, and having a culture of feedback on your team it's going to be what makes you you and your team successful, right? Because if you can tell each other what sucks or what's going well, or what could be improved, you're going to constantly be in a state of continuous improvement, right? But if there isn't that open door culture, then there's constantly back channeling, then that's not going to be progress for anybody, right?
Absolutely.
So ultimately, you can have the best manager in the world, but if the team is not, there are certain things that need to exist within the team as well in order for the entire team to be effective, right? It's not you're Superwoman or Superman that's going to come and save the day. Like it really does take two to tango. Like, or on
Absolutely.
a team, it takes, n number of people to tango. Right. So.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I have a kind of follow-up question to what we've been discussing. And I think a common concern that people have when they are maybe deciding whether they're going to transition to engineering management, especially as women, is like whether they'll still be able to write code and whether they'll still be perceived as technical. And I don't know if that's like a concern that you've had, or if you do feel like you're still technically progressing, and how maybe you work on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I guess I feel like I'm technically progressing because I feel like I have a wider, I don't know, like a bird's eye view into like lots of different things that are happening within the company. And I'm like, oh, okay, this thing is happening this way. Interesting, right? So there are more kind of, I would say, things that I'm aware of from a peripheral sense. But, and I write code with my team. I code review. I'm not primarily responsible for delivering software, but there's things that I work on that are like, oh, I can unblock you with this thing, or, oh, I can help you debug this thing. I would say I'm not, I don't know. I still have side projects that I work on outside of work. But I don't feel like I'm like regressing per se. I think I would say that maybe the muscle for like how fast I can solve a problem, right? Or how fast I can maybe write code is like slowly getting like right. There's like a slow attrition. But in terms of like actual software, I mean, I feel like I'm constantly solving software problems, even though I'm not necessarily writing the code. So I don't feel there's like an attrition there. I don't know. I would say like maybe I can check back in a year, but I feel like I'm constantly like thinking or critiquing or coming up with software solutions. So I have to say, like, I really do miss like being primarily responsible for just that. But I like 2 weeks later, I would be completely bored. So I don't know. It's like you're never happy. Like you have to just I think make your own variety. But I still write code, just not as much. And yes, I do miss it. But getting to do all these other things is, I think, a much more like I think there are 100 people that can write code better than I can. I'm even though I'm a pretty good engineer, but there's people who can do that, but those people are not maybe willing to do the other pieces, which I can do, right? Like there's really important people problems and process problems to solve that people who can write software are not necessarily even interested in solving, right? So I can kind of do both, and that's I think that's the advantage that I have, and it's a sacrifice, but it's the path that I've chosen, and I have to live with it for now. So,
how have you been learning about management? I don't know. Do you read books, and if so, have you read any books about management?
Yeah, I've been like doing some self-study. I would say. There's books like, I don't know, Mythical Man Month and Radical Candor and five examples of dysfunctional teams. What else have I been reading? What was that? Laura Hogan, I think. I forget her last name exactly, but it's a book. It's a really new book, a new book that she came out with a few months ago called Resilient Management that I've been reading. That's pretty good. It's a short and sweet book that's geared towards new engineering managers. I mean, there's lots of good books, and I'm happy to like recommend some more. But yeah, I've been basically trying to read a few hours a week and go through kind of Google has a pretty good training program for new managers that I started a few months ago. I would say there's a decent amount of resources out there, but ultimately the best trainer is going to be a mentor, which I have like a few mentors at work, outside of work. those have really been I think like just really invaluable resources because, I can go to them with like a real problem and say like, okay, how would you fix this? Right. Or like, how do I deal with said thing?
I have a couple book recommendations for you. My manager sent me this one for Christmas. It's called Orbiting the Giant Hairball. And it was written by one of the guys. He was very successful and he worked for Hallmark for years. And it talks about how to promote creativity when you're working in a large company and how to still, benefit from being in a large company without getting lost. So that one's really, really good. And it's written beautifully because it's not like a traditional book format. Like all the pages have different layouts and artwork. It's really, really cool. And then the second is Creativity Inc. And it was written by one of the guys who founded Pixar. And it's both a history of Pixar and how they merged with Disney, but also it talks a lot about management and how, they manage their people effectively. So I think both of those are really great.
That's awesome. Radical Candor is one that I've been reading. I'm reading right now, actually. That's pretty solid. It's about communication and giving honest feedback and, just like a phenomenal like thing for not just engineering, not just like managers, right? I think everyone should kind of like understand like how to kind of give good feedback. And I guess the other thing that's on my list is No Hard Feelings, embracing the power of the secret power of embracing emotions at work. That was recommended by a colleague of mine. So that's next up on my list. But yeah, I mean, you constantly have to be, management is definitely, people go to school for it and you can't understate how important it is to like take the time to study it. Right. And as engineers, you have a lot of bias, like where you're like, hey, I can do this. Like, like NPM install, like, NPM install management, like management learn, knowledge, but
that's awesome.
But yeah, you have to really take the time to learn. So.
Awesome. Well, another conversation that we were having before we pressed record was about working remotely. And I want to follow up on that. What is it like building personal relationships with employees while you're working remote?
Oh, great question. So this is actually my first time working on a distributed team. I would say fully distributed team. I've worked with people in other offices before. And it, my first week I was like, I felt like I was going to be really lonely and like, oh my God, I'm going to be so alone. But literally like 8 to 9 hours a day, I'm connected with various people, on Slack and Zoom calls, team meetings, etc. So there's always like a sense of being connected. But you're really forced to, I think, be a better communicator, and especially with like time zone differences, like you have to feel comfortable just putting things in writing versus like having a conversation about it with people, and really putting things in writing, both in Slack or just in an actual like markdown document. It really I don't know. It just allows more people to chime into the conversation. It's like a better shelf life. So even if you're all working in the same office, I think the skills that I've picked up working for the past few months as a remote employee they're skills that are going to benefit me for the rest of my life. But there are serious challenges, right? Like like not being able to go out to lunch with your team or not being able to like buy food for people, which is like my favorite way to like bribe and bribe people into becoming friends with me is to like feed them, so I think that's a challenge, but really we're always connected, and there are like yearly initiatives to like I think where everyone gets together to do like an all hands or that's a thing that happens, but I would say that like there are many upsides to being remote, but there are, the downsides are like if you like eating with people and, occasionally like giving people real high fives, that's like, you don't get to do that. Right. But the trade-off is like you get a lot of freedom, and you can kind of work from anywhere in the world. Even though most days I'm just like working from my house. Right. So. I think it's funny how everyone's like, yeah, you can work anywhere in the world. And then like you're still home like 80% of the time. Um, but I don't know. It's supposedly the future of work, you know? So I don't know. How about you? Are y'all like remoties or?
I am still right now for another month or so, I think. So it's an adventure for me. I was a remote engineer for the first half of the year, and that was incredibly hard for me. Just felt very isolated and hard to connect with the people that I was working with. But then now I teach remote, and I think that is a lot easier for feeling connected and being connected with the people that I work with and all that. So kind of a up and down experience there, but I'm moving back to working in person next month. So
yeah, I mean, I would say, would I prefer to be in person? Like, absolutely. You know, but I think the experience of working remotely is one that I don't know, everyone should try at least once, right?
Definitely. We had a whole episode on working remote, and I think it's amazing for a lot of people at a very different stage of life than I am at, I think. But I think it's really hard when you're maybe at a different stage of life where you're maybe more, you don't have a family yet, which is my situation.
But I guess, to be clear though, I think NPM is still very new at being fully remote. I mean, they've always had distributed like teams, but I think this is now like the first time that the company has gone fully distributed. And, you know, there's a lot of responsibility that the company has in like coming up to speed with like what it means to build a good remote culture, you know? And so that's where kind of it's not something that should just fall on the like individual employees. Like it really needs to be, there's a culture that needs to be pushed from, you know, from a central place, and, you know, that, and kind of norms and, you know, guidelines that I think the company sets for like how people should, you know, what the expectations are for people, like when they're communicating, et cetera. So, you know, like if for companies that are going remote, like it's work, it's not just like give people a laptop and just say, go home. Like, you know, you have to still create a culture of like what it means to like communicate, collaborate, et cetera. And give people the tools and the means to do that, you know?
Absolutely.
Definitely.
As you know, kind of one of the last questions, what advice would you give to people looking to become an engineering manager?
I would say you need to kind of have an honest conversation with yourself on like what it is, why it is that you want to do this, right? So are you interested in supporting people? Are you interested in squashing like and combating fires as they come up? Are you okay and comfortable with lots of context switching? Are you do you enjoy mentoring and supporting and coaching and sponsoring like people, like because that's a huge part of your job? You know, are you okay with like not being the best engineer in the room anymore, right? Because that's something that I had to be okay with, right? Because you're now really relying on your team to come up with good decisions, and you're there to like guide them and support them. But you know, you have to kind of give people autonomy, you know, to make those decisions. So you know, there's a big differences between someone who's a technical lead or a principal engineer and an engineering manager. But there's a lot of overlap, but there's differences. And so, you know, you really need to kind of dig deep to kind of understand, are you trying to be a tech lead? Or are you trying to lead teams, you know, technically, or are you really trying to kind of manage teams, you know, and manage the process that the team uses, and, you know, manage the direction for the team. Like there's differences there, and there's overlap. So it's a big decision. I wouldn't go into it lightly. But I would say that like if, you know, like if it doesn't work out, like it's good to know, like you should give yourself like 90 days, and you know, you can fire yourself after 90 days if that's a thing that, you know, you can set up a contract with yourself, right? So yeah, I would say talk to other engineering managers and understand that the role is different at every company. It's not the same. And so just do your research, and, get a mentor. And I would say if there's an opportunity for you to do it within the same company, that would probably be the best move, because you're not learning about the company as well as learning how to be a new engineering manager, which is the challenge that I have. You have the, you can focus on just like the new role versus like the new setting, right? So if you have an opportunity to do it like within the same company, that's probably the best way to make that transition. I guess, what I should say this is that like one of the most surprising aspects of being an engineering manager has been that, like, when things are good, they're extra good. Like you feel it's amplified. And I think when things are challenging or they're bad, like that's also amplified because, you're now responsible for like more than just yourself. It's not 1x, it's like 5x or 4x, right? And so, just that's something to keep in mind, is that like it's a responsibility, and you have to be okay with the good and the bad, because it's not always good. Like, I think that was like the biggest surprise for me was like, oh wow, like, when if things are challenging, like you really, and I'm someone that really, really cares about my team, so you really take it to heart, you really feel it, and you really like, okay, really, I really want to improve this, it's much different than like when you're an individual contributor, like, it just, you're like, okay, yeah, this sucks, but whatever, like, not my problem, not my monkeys, not my circus. But now they are your monkeys and it is your circus. So, so.
Awesome. So first of all, thank you so much for spending time with us. It was a pleasure to get to talk with you again. And I hope we get to cross paths soon in the future as well. Where can we find more about you? Where can we find you on the intranet?
At Nomad Techie, all the places, Nomad Techie with IE. And yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you as well. And yeah, it's been great. I feel like Ali, you've been quiet, I don't know, maybe my breath stinks or something.
No, this has been amazing. Thank you so much, and learned so much about engineering management specifically in this discussion. So thank you so much. Want to do a quick round of shout outs before we leave. So Amal, do you want to start with your shout out?
Yeah, sure. I recently been spending time with Henry Zhu. I was hosting him at my house. I want to give him a shout out. He's the kind of lead maintainer of Babel, and has just shown a lot of tremendous leadership, for that has kind of let that project blossom. It's really the backbone of a lot of modern JavaScript web applications, and so we need to give some more love to Babel and all the cool presets that have been coming out as well. So yeah, shout out to Babel and Henry Zhu in particular.
Yeah, he's amazing, and Babel is such an important project. Emma, do you have any shout outs?
I do. So by the time this episode airs, I will have completed my recording for a lynda.com or LinkedIn Learning course, which I'm super excited about. It's about building a technical resume. And I just want to shout out the team that I got to work with. The producer has been absolutely a pleasure to work with. So if anyone from LinkedIn Learning or Lynda is listening, you guys have amazing employees. So shout out to you. What about you, Ali?
I have another book recommendation. So Emma actually gave me this recommendation over Christmas break, and it was amazing. The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Definitely recommend reading it. I feel like our show is half book focused, half tech focused at this point.
Did you like it just as much as Daisy Jones and the Six?
Yeah, I love both of them. They're so good. Some of my favorites. And the audiobooks for them are so good too, like really well produced. And Daisy Jones especially has a full cast on it, which is really cool. So I highly recommend that. Some books kind of lose their amazingness in audio format, but I feel like they're even better. Awesome. Well, if you like this episode, tweet about it. We'll select one tweeter each week to win a Smashing Magazine book. And we post new podcasts every Monday. So make sure to subscribe to be notified. Please leave a review as well. It allows other people to find out about the show and just feels amazing when we read them. And thank you again so much to Amal for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Pleasure to be on the show. Thank you so much, Jill.